Okay, so more to add to the Devin Haney and Javonte Davis situation. More on Devin Haney. Now they have a great business, and I like how they do business. They got good marketing for Devin during his build up for fights. People who come out and support him, the whole social media campaign and whatnot. He really knows how to sell his own fights, right? He knows how to sell being the A side or the B side, right? But here's the thing. Here's what happened with the Tank Davis situation. I believe this is my opinion. My personal opinion is that, okay, so after his last fight at 135, that was the end of the Bob Arum deal, right? So that was the end of the road. So now they're in a dilemma. What do we do next? So they can either do what they had been talking about, which was moving up and fighting at 140, or they can stay at 135 and find fights there with all the belts. He was the undisputed champ. So now you have to ask yourself, what is the best thing for them to do? If you stay with Bob Arum, right? You got to think about, if you stay with Bob Arum, if you re-sign with Bob Arum, then there's a possibility that you might fight a Shakur Stevenson, right? You might fight somebody that can knock you off the top before you can get the big fight with Tank. Not saying that you're gonna beat him, but saying that it's the biggest fight of your career, right? You want the biggest fight of your career for all the marbles, right? Before you face somebody else that can knock you off, like a Shakur Stevenson. So if you re-sign with Bob Arum and stay at 135 or go up to 140, there's still a possibility you might be fighting Shakur Stevenson. But if you go ahead and you sign with Eddie Hearn and the Zone and Matchbox, right, then you kind of dodge that bullet, and you can be settled on the fact that Eddie Hearns will be able to secure a championship bout for you, which he had his first fight at 140, which I believe Eddie Hearn went out and made happen for him overtime. He was working overtime to get Devin Haney a championship bout in order to win his contract. And I believe that is what he chose. So instead of keeping his belts at 135 to eventually fight Tank, if he had defended his belts and remained champion, he would have eventually fought Tank. Considering that he might had to fight Shakur Stevenson right before Tank, if he had re-signed with Bob Arum, or even if he had went out independently. He would have had to put too much money up if he had went out independently. So it makes more sense for his business to just go ahead and sign with the promoter. So it's like a co-promotional deal. But I guess to him it made more sense to move up, to dodge the bullet of fighting a Shakur Stevenson before meeting a Tank Davis, and sacrificing by relinquishing the belts. So he got the deal with Eddie Hearn. He got what he wanted, a new contract, which would set him up with some good fights maybe down the road, and being able to dodge that bullet. And on top of that, they went out and I guess took a risk to say, okay, if we get this deal with Eddie Hearn and it's as good as it seems, right, we're gonna get a championship bout, we'll have another belt, and then we can start re-campaigning to fight Tank Davis. You see how that doesn't make any sense at the end of the day? Because at the end of the day, the best thing to have done would have been to re-sign with Bob Arum and remain the champ, if you are as good as you say you are, it's to remain the champion at 135. Don't talk about this making weight stuff, because you're the one talking about Tank Davis is too fat for the division, right? He's fat, right? But you can't make weight. Tank Davis is fat, but you can't make weight. You know, see how that doesn't add up? So yeah, I believe he should have struggled to make the 135. Made the deal happen with Tank. I believe it would have came sooner than he thought, because he had the belts. He had everything Tank Davis needed to secure his legacy at 135. Here's why. Terrence Crawford just became the undisputed champ. And then you have Devin Haney becoming the undisputed champ. Who's missing in the equation? Who has to prove themselves more than anybody? Especially when you're the cash cow of the 135 division. You need those belts. So Devin Haney had everything he needed to negotiate at the table, and he gave it up to dodge a contract with Bob Arum, just to get a belt at 140 to go back and re-campaign his position and why he believes he's ready to fight a Tank Davis. Everything else is rhetoric, right? Everything else is him trying to boost his value, boost his worth up as a champion. But when you look at the papers, when you look at it on paper, you see a fighter who relinquishes their undisputed status to become a one belt champion at a higher division to fight the same fighter they've been talking about this entire time in their previous division. You see how he has less to negotiate with at the table? You see why Devin Haney, you see why Tank Davis has reason to turn down the fight? Because Devin Haney has nothing to offer. What does Tank Davis need with one belt at 140 when he's going to relinquish it anyway and return to 135 to fight, to possibly still collect all of the belts at 135? That's a wasted fight. He could have used that fight to get another belt at 135. You got to make sense of it, right? Tank Davis is not tearing down doors to fight a Devin Haney, and for good reason. For good reasons. Number one, he doesn't produce the numbers, pay-per-view wise, stadium gate wise, fan base wise. He doesn't produce the numbers. Skill wise, he's not as skilled as a Tank Davis. He gets touched a lot in his fights when he's trying to finesse the fighter. Tank Davis gets touched, yes, but it's when it's a strategy to move forward or a strategy to box toe to toe and deliver a counter, right? He's always fast enough or quick enough, or his IQ is high enough, we've seen in fights, that he's able to get out of the way and not get hit when he wants to. It's just, you also have to consider he's also a knockout artist. So when you're a knockout artist, you can expect to get touched because you want to pull the counter. You have to have a chin to be a knockout artist. You got to be able to take a hit. So it's expected for Tank Davis to get touched. But when you haven't had a knockout in a long time and you're not considered the knockout artist, why are you getting touched? Shakur Stevenson doesn't get touched that much. You see? So yeah, I believe that's why they moved up. They moved up to dodge the Bob Arum contract. Because what that contract brought with it was another fight that I don't think wants to fight, which is the Shakur Stevenson fight. Just so he can get to the Tank Davis fight, he dodged that, hoping that he would be able to move up and benefit off of having one belt and then approaching Tank Davis with a lot of money. Tank Davis is with the money team. They just got to deal with Amazon. His financial situation has always been good. So that's the wrong thing to come to the table with, thinking you're going to move on him with that. He's the one that's supposed to be paying you for the fight. He puts up the money and says, listen, take this deal and we can fight. But obviously you haven't produced the things that calls for a Tank Davis fight right now in your career. You see how it doesn't make sense? He should have stayed at 135. Signed the Bob Arum deal because he was just with him. Why would he have any prejudice to get him against him now? Re-signed with Bob Arum and tried to make the Tank Davis fight happen. I think he would have had a better chance. He has all the belts. But alternatively, like what he should do now is, now that he's at 140, he should stop mentioning Tank, right? Because right now, mentioning Tank is, and him not being prepared to be across from the negotiation table to take a Tank fight, it's kind of messing up his image, right? The social media is already starting to pick at what they see as holes in his campaign against facing Tank, right? You're starting to see things happen. He could easily reposition his marketing to say something like, okay, I just had all the belts at 135. Now I'm at 140. I got all the belts at 135 in one shot, meaning I got them all from Kambosos except one, right? But now at 140, watch me collect the belts one by one. It's a new hero's journey, right? He's repositioning himself at a new weight class. And at the same time, he respects the people who are at this weight class or who are already in this weight class, as opposed to coming to the weight class, fighting one fight, getting one belt, and then turning around and making it seem like he's the champion of the division overnight, which gives him the prerogative to turn around and try to fight Tank Davis, who is at the 135, which would mean he would either have to go back down to 135 or see if he can get Tank to come to 140. You see, it's almost like he's blinded by the fact that he has an entire division in front of him that he needs to face to rebuild his reasons why the fans would actually not want to see, but actually pay for a Tank Davis and Devin Haney fight. Not that the fans don't want to see it, but you have to make it make sense in terms of them actually buying the pay-per-view. What looks better? You having all of the belts or almost all of the belts at 140 and then going for the fight with Tank? Now you're closer to, or you become a 2-division undisputed world champion. Now what do you think the negotiations will look like, right? you'll have a whole lot more leverage if you approach it like that. So I think that's what he should do. I think he should try to become undisputed at 140. And once he becomes undisputed at 140, now he's a 2-division undisputed world champion. Who would not want to pay for that fight against Tank Davis?